tracking oil market uncertainty in the aftermath of the Russian invasion of Ukraine, renewing the debate over oil drilling in America. And there's a new twist, the possibility of a public-private partnership. Well, Yahoo Finance senior columnist Rick Newman is here with a closer look. Hi, Rick. What are you watching here?
Oh, I've been spending a lot of time understand what happened in the oil and gas industry in 2019, 2020, which affects the price today and capacity today. And I've seen some interesting ideas about how perhaps the government should get a little more involved in the oil and gas industry here in the United States. So the latest thing I noticed was an essay at War on the Rocks. That's a national security website. And two veterans of the industry say, look, the U.S. already maintains a strategic reserve, almost 800 million barrels of oil. What if they actually began to get involved with some oil wells so they could have drilled but untapped oil wells that they might be able to tap in an emergency? So the government might be getting one step more involved in the domestic oil and gas energy here in the United States. And there's even a guy, an energy historian, who suggests the government should form a national refining company when we need some extra capacity for things like gasoline refining. This national refining company wouldn't have to worry about profitability. It could just bring on some spare capacity when we needed it, such as, say, right now. So I don't think the government is close to doing this, but you are seeing some interesting and provocative new ideas for what to do about oil and gas availability.
We, in a sense, already are. To your point about the Strategic Petroleum Reserve, we also sold barrels to foreign countries recently, which some were outraged about. But what's the knock? Why shouldn't they get involved in the oil industry?
Well, when you say we, the United States, sold these barrels, that was not the government doing that. And in fact, the government doesn't determine how much oil and gas we produce in the United States, but it does in Saudi Arabia, it does in Iraq, in most of the Middle Eastern and OPEC countries. So, I think there's an obvious pushback here, which is, look, the government should just not be involved in any industry that it doesn't have to be involved in. And then you get into this fine line question. I mean, the government is involved in lots of industries through regulation, clearly through different types of tax incentives.
Subsidies.
I mean, look,
CHIPS Act.
Look, I was going to say, I mean, look what Congress just did. They just provided these subsidies for semiconductors, and that is creeping toward what you might call industrial policy, which is the government actually making policy to encourage different types of business activity here in the United States. Dave, one thing that's happening in the energy industry is because of climate change and all the efforts to reduce our consumption of carbon. Businesses just do not want to invest in new capacity unless they know they're going to get their money back on a fairly short time period, which is shorter than you would typically do for capital projects. So investors want their money back in 5 years, because if we're no longer going to be putting gasoline into automobiles in 10 years, I don't want to be stuck with that asset in 10 years. So this is where, I wouldn't call it a market failure yet, but market incentives are not doing what they used to do.
So, Rick, what sort of position does this put oil companies in? On the one hand, they want these opportunities to drill more. On the other hand, of course, you have President Biden's green agenda. How does this work, especially when President Biden was critical about the sort of profits that some of these energy companies were pulling in?
I mean, it's complicated. It's hard to boil down to one or two simple ideas, but a couple of things. First, the big oil companies, energy companies, Exxon, Shell, and so on, they are getting used to the idea that we are moving away from carbon consumption. They know better than most people that it's going to take a long time and we're going to be dependent on fossil fuels for a long time. But they are getting into new types of technology, such as storing carbon sequestration. This is something that big energy companies have the technology to do. And so they're kind of transitioning over to that. Of course, they want the best and most favorable treatment from the government they can get. They want the government to approve all their permits and give as many leases as possible. And they have been asking the Biden administration for those types of things. And they got a couple of those types of things in the Inflation Reduction Act, I should say the ambitiously named Inflation Reduction Act, which Democrats might be able to pass. There are a couple things in there, such as let's speed up pipeline permitting. Let's do a few other things to give oil and gas drillers more transparency. And at the same time, Congress wants to invest almost $400 billion in green energy. So that bill, if it passes, would do both things at once. Do a little bit to help provide more of the energy we need today, while also investing in the energy we need tomorrow.
Good stuff. Rick Newman, good to see you, sir.